Hi, my name is Owen Harris, and this video presentation is for my literacy narrative, where I want to be discussing the rise in technology in the classroom, in specific, the abundance of laptops. What I've noticed, at least, they're all Chromebooks in the classroom, and the expectation that children know how to use them and are able to navigate them, and also have access to that sort of technology at home, and how this can open up both a positive avenue for multimodality and learning through multi-literacies, but also can create a disparage or a discrepancy between families of different socioeconomic statuses and the children that may or may not be accustomed to using this kind of technology. So I hope you enjoy this presentation, and let's get it underway. So, as I said, I think it's time that we get into this presentation and get things going. And I wanted to start it off with just my favorite quote so far this semester, or the 4 weeks of the semester that we have had at least. It's this one here by Gunther Krest. We cannot understand how children find their way into print unless we understand the principles of their meaning making. And I think that's incredibly relevant as we enter this technological 21st century classroom where we're never going to be able to understand how children are navigating or utilizing technology, the internet, all of the tools that are at their disposal these days, unless we understand their meaning making or their process behind what they're trying to do. Because they could potentially be doing things that we haven't even thought of, and we just need to know their process as to why they're going about it that way. And I think this picture also highlights just what our children these days are surrounded by, all the students. They just have so much social media, so much things thrown at them in one go that it can be overwhelming, but it also creates minds completely different from our own because we may not have had that growing up. So I want to center on the use of Chromebooks in the classroom. I want to talk about the risks that it can have for separating the wealthy and the poor, but also the assets that it can have in the classroom if it's integrated properly. And Chromebooks, they're everywhere. As a current supply teacher, I walk into classrooms and I just see students working on them in pairs. They're in groups at the back of the class while I'm teaching with their headphones on. While teachers are walking around, they're putting their hands up and they're utilizing the Chromebook integrated fully into the lesson itself. It's not even just for projects anymore. It's just non-stop Chromebook use. And this is great. This can be an excellent tool, but by incorporating Chromebooks or laptops into the classroom, if there's any expectation of students being able to have one at home or being able to bring in their own, it can create an educational divide. And I read this article, I guess about a year ago, if it came out in February 2018, about just the rich-poor divide that these laptops can create. This is by no means a peer-reviewed article. It's just something that I found interesting when I read. And I think this expectation that children either have a laptop to bring to school or are going to have a computer at home, it can highlight the students that may not be able to afford one or may not be able to afford the nicest one. Because the poor kids, they always want to be as well equipped as their higher income peers, just as quoted right there. But when you're looking at a MacBook that can cost $1,200, $1,400 versus a HP that can cost $200, some lower income families can't justify dishing out that kind of money, or they might not be able to dish out any at all. And there's this pressure to look good. All students, they want to fit in, and yet if they can't, there's just another thing that they might feel or actually get made fun of for. Feel like they're going to get made fun of for, or actually get made fun of for, just along with their clothing and what sports they play or how they look. So it can just create that greater divide, and it's discussed in Heath's article, which I found really interesting a little bit, or it's discussed a little bit. I found the article itself very interesting, where we talked about the three communities, Maintown, Tracton, and Roadville, and just the way that these children were raised differently, surrounded by their own literacies, and how that kind of impacted future education. We had some students from the Roadville and Tracton communities who just were never integrated with either literacy at all or just were not done. It had it done in an educational and appropriate way, and this had huge lasting impacts moving forwards for them. Some of the students then were no longer successful in school, even by the grades 5 and grade 6, because of the detrimental impacts this had. And a lot of it seemed to do with a difference in socioeconomic status, where in contrast we have students in the Maintown community who, because they were raised, either potentially had a parent who was an educator, or just had more access to the money and the time to be able to contribute to their kids' education, that they entered the classroom and not only did they excel in literacy, but they learned all these other skills as well, which I thought was the most interesting part of the article, because you wouldn't have expected that something as simple as learning to read can teach them how to listen correct, follow appropriate cues, how to get things from parents or teachers, or how to handle interactions. There was kind of all these other sub-skills that they learned just from the simple act of reading. And moving into this whole technological world, I wonder how the children who have access to these laptops and computers and iPads and everything, starting as young as maybe 2 or 3, how that might change what skills they're actually bringing into the classroom, aside from how to navigate these tech pieces. Are they going to also come in with different classroom behaviors, classroom skills, just because they've learned them from the way that they've had to interact with their parents? So I was a bit more on the fence about the introduction of Chromebooks and the necessity of laptops in the classroom, but this post by Nicole McGahey really kind of struck home with me about how important and vital technology can be. She talks about being in a special education classroom, and special education is something near and dear to my heart. I've worked with Best Buddies for years. I used to work as a one-to-one counselor at a camp to integrate kids with special needs. She talks about how a student was nonverbal, but technology on her wheelchair allowed her to communicate. And I think that is a shocking thing that Chromebooks can allow, and other pieces of technology as well, is they can get students to communicate with us that may not be able to otherwise. It might not be as drastic as having a full-on language or speech barrier, but it could be maybe a student that isn't as good at writing, prefers typing, or has more access to information on the computer so they can write a better essay. So there definitely is, just on bringing students and kind of trying to differentiate that education and make sure that we're incorporating more students into the classroom. Technology is vital. It is absolutely necessary. In Burnett et al.'s article, Changing Contexts for 21st Century Literacies, it also talks about how other countries are trying to incorporate technology into their classroom more so that they can change the way that the dynamic that the classroom is set up. So here it talks about China and how they used to have a knowledge-based and teacher-led approach, which I feel is probably pretty similar to the way that our system is set up right now. We're trying to tweak it, but for right now it's definitely very knowledge-based and teacher-led. But technology allows individuality and expression and sharing knowledge, where each student can become the master of their own topic. And rather than the teacher being the center and the holder of all knowledge, it's centered on the learners, and it can have everyone learn together as one, rather than one dictating the answers of what is right and wrong to the others. So it can also be used as a way to completely change the dynamic of the classroom and the teaching style that whoever is the teacher is trying to use. I think as well, in the article by Kress, Literacy, Identity, and Futures, we need to be aware that literacy is changing, as cited here. It's dynamic, it's fluid, speech-like and writing it's changing at rapid paces, and the technological factor is only adding to that. In order for us to be successful teachers and for us to set our students up for the future, we do need to make sure that our students are prepared for what's out there. And with something as rapidly changing as technology and all other forms of communication as discussed, we need to make sure that we're setting them up. They need to be prepared for that multimodality of how to navigate multiple sources and everything that's going on, how to read different signs, how to understand the difference between a properly reported piece of news and the fake news that is just flooding us 24/7 nowadays, how to navigate social media. That LinkedIn now is vital to get a job. They need to know how to properly utilize that. So there definitely is absolutely important skills that are needed there from technology. I just think that Chromebooks, to kind of conclude here with the little pro and cons, Chromebooks are something that they have their place, but it also just needs to be navigated smartly. And we need to make sure that we're not separating our wealthier students from our poorer students. And I don't have a solution for that, but that is just something that I've thought about a lot, and it kind of is near and dear to my heart. And moving forwards, that's something that I would like to think about in all aspects of my education, as I want to make sure we're bringing all students together, not separating them. So hopefully you enjoyed my literacy narrative. But that is the end. So thank you so much and have a fantastic day. Well, Professor Collier, I hope you enjoyed the presentation and thank you so much for all of your guidance both in this and throughout the entire course. So hope you enjoyed. Have a great night. Bye.
Open all the doors and let you out into the world. Closing